little sweetheart.
They can't do nothing because I tap dance.
This is WVCR 88.3 FM, The Saint. You are listening to Calling Out Controversy, featuring hosts Andrew Hecht and Justin Kenyon. Hey everybody, this is Andrew Hecht.
And Justin Kenyon.
And we are calling out controversy every week, Tuesdays, 11 p.m., so you know it's us just by the time. So, we have some current events, and then we're jumping right into the long-awaited Summer of Rights.
Let's do this.
Yeah, let's kill it. What do we got first, Justin?
Well, first off, the Supreme Court will not reinstate the Indiana ban on abortion for the purpose of sex, race, or disability selection.
Okay.
However, the bill will let the state of Indiana regulate the disposal of fetal remains.
Okay, so this is a Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals decision that said that both the ban on abortion and the regulation of fetal remains were unconstitutional and defied SCOTUS precedent.
Precisely.
Okay, so what the Supreme Court did was they heard the case, and then they said that the ban is not in line with their view.
Yes.
And they didn't uphold the ban, but what they did do is allow the government to regulate the disposal of fetal remains.
Yes, pretty much so.
This was a very compromised decision. You can read more about it at the Wall Street Journal. This came out earlier today, and it's still up there if you want to look at it in the morning, or if you subscribe and you look at it right now. We're going to try and post a link on the show, but of course, if you're a member of Wall Street Journal, you know that you have to sign in to view the full article. The next big thing on the list is a little more fun. Ms. Mackenzie Bezos.
Yep, Mackenzie Bezos.
Go for it.
Signed the Giving Pledge, which will give away half of her overall wealth to charity. Currently, she's the 22nd wealthiest person with a net worth of $36.6 billion.
That's a lot of money.
Very much so. A lot of dough.
Insane. And she wants to turn around and then donate half of her wealth.
I mean, it's not really going to make much of a difference to her because she's still going to have tens of millions, billions of dollars. So I mean, I'm
all for philanthropy. Jeff Bezos put out a tweet that said he was in support of her philanthropic desires. I'm in favor of the Giving Pledge if that's something people want to do. If they want to volunteer and give up half their money, that's their own decision. I personally, considering I'm not worth anything right now, don't see the
we're both
sense in that, but
we're both broke college students, so if us giving away half our net worth won't really mean much.
Right. I do think it's interesting though that the richest people on the planet just decide like they have so much money they're going to give half of it away.
I mean, this has been going on for several years.
So
I mean, the
crazy.
first big guys to do it were like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. I mean, philanthropy with billionaires have been going on ever since like John Rockefeller.
I mean, I love the idea of philanthropy. I think donating it to charity is good. I think that maybe a smarter decision would be to start a charity that tackles a specific problem that you want to see solved.
Bill and Melinda Gates have done with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing but respect for the Gates family. And of course, the Rockefellers, they started schools, they started centers, halls. Same thing with the Carnegies. That's way, way back in the day, though. But modern, just giving your money away is a little weird.
They're the ones that started it.
Yeah.
They're the ones that started the trend. So, I mean, everyone kind of just followed in their footsteps to get here.
Of course. So that's what you missed in Tuesday's current events. Obviously, we're going to be covering the abortion topic all summer, trying to give you updates when we can, trying to be respectful and inclusive about everyone's opinions. But more importantly, we're kicking off the Summer of Rights. We're covering censorship because I think it does a really good and all-encompassing way of representing the First Amendment: freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition, and separation of church and state, and so freedom of religion.
Yeah, pretty much the Power Five.
Yep. And with us is Mark Mahoney. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm a editorial page editor over the Daily Gazette in Schenectady. I've been there about 5 years. Started my journalism career at WEOK, WPDH in Poughkeepsie doing news, and worked at the state capitol for about a year or so, covering Governor Mario Cuomo and the legislature back then, and got into print journalism in 1988 at the Post-Star in Glens Falls, and I worked there for about 23 years. Left there and took a 3-year break kind of to do media relations, and I worked for the New York State Bar Association in Albany as a media relations professional, and then had an opportunity to get back into editorial writing at the Gazette, so I snapped it up. So it's good to be back in journalism.
That's awesome. So you've done radio, television, newspapers, magazines. Is that another one? Or?
No, not really magazines. Not too much TV here and there, but I graduated from Ithaca College in '85 in broadcast communications. I think my major was back then, or media communications. So I attended Dutchess Community College in Poughkeepsie too.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm a community college kid as well.
Yeah, love it. Great education there. It's terrific.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Let's kick off our conversation. Let's talk about, obviously the easiest one to get out of the way is talking about censorship in terms of freedom of religion. This country does a very good job of not censoring people's religious beliefs.
As long as they say separate from the state.
Yeah, as long as they say, well, that's less a part of censorship and more a part of the invisible wall type thing that we have to maintain, which in recent discussions, as we've covered last week, were kind of being blurred.
Yeah.
But it's not a censorship. We don't really prohibit religions in this country. So that's an important thing to remember when talking about how censorship would affect the First Amendment.
Yeah.
In terms of petitioning, we seem to do a pretty good job of, at least on a government level, allowing people to petition freely.
I mean, there's a whole entire website based around it, change.org.
Yeah. Yeah, and where you can sign petitions and share with them on Facebook. You can share with them, I think, on Twitter as well.
Twitter, Facebook. I'm not sure about Instagram. I know a majority of social media you can.
Yeah. I believe they have links to like most major
pretty much. And then also the White House also has petitions too, and I think if it gets above around, I believe 10,000 signatures, they take a look at it.
Yeah. So really the big three that are most often censored, either by government or by private entities working for a special interest, not for a special interest, but with a special interest in mind, would be freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press.
Yeah.
I think we can agree on that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the freedom of assembly, I think, is more of a media issue. Where
How so?
Because at least in my experience, the way I view it is they will portray an assembly of a certain group of people, depending on what station and what the opposite belief is. For example, like Ben Shapiro appearing at UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
You could say his freedom to assemble, his freedom to have a lecture there, which was brought by the college Republicans at the time, was hindered. It was censored by the administration. Conversely, when the media picked it up, they muted it, unless you were paying attention to Fox News, in which case they blew it all the way out of proportion.
Or any really conservative media outlet.
So with the Constitution in respect to media, it's my opinion that the media presence in everyday life is too large to just allow them to censor themselves or to have a power over the choice of like picking one story over another and blowing it out of proportion, as opposed to like presenting all the major events for that week like accurately. Or maybe there should be at least a government-run newspaper or something like that. I'm not sure.
Well, then you're also getting into the battle of whether of either propaganda or not, or like also now the marketplace media, where like if you're liberal, you go to like MSNBC or something, or if you're conservative, you go to Fox or something like that.
Right, but the marketplace media is kind of like where my opinion's drawn, which is that you have places that are catering news, and news is supposed to be notable events, weather, and sports, which is an acronym that I learned a long time ago. I don't even know if that's accurate, but like
I thought it was northeast, west, and south. I heard that too.
and that's the thing. But it was supposed to be, at least I grew up thinking, the news means facts-based news reporting, not glorified with these opinion pieces, and not trying to start a small war in your local community over CNN or Fox or stuff like that. And that's just kind of where I'm saying maybe it's time the government does say, like, maybe we need to not censor but prevent censoring through selective process.
Well, is censoring actively telling somebody what to say, as well as telling them not what to say? The discussion of censorship comes from, the Constitution only applies to the government censoring other organizations, and you're talking about maybe censoring the media or trying to get them to all conform to some kind of universal view of what constitutes factual news and what opinions they should include. Isn't that in itself a form of censorship?
I think. See, here's my problem: is that I want to say no, but I think you're right. And that's kind of like my struggle. And like, I don't know how to not vocalize the opinion, but how to really understand what I am looking for. You've mentioned previously, before we started recording, that you go through a censorship process. Can you take us through that? Or?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it that, but
yeah.
But there's we're a private. Just speaking from my position as a newspaper editor and kind of deciding which content goes in the paper and whatnot. We in my role as opinion page editor at the Daily Gazette, my job and part of my job is to evaluate what information comes in from the citizens and what information we'll publish. We publish a very active letters to the editor section, which we actually call Your Voice, to kind of remind people that this is their opportunity. And we encourage all points of view, regardless of whether you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump, conservative, liberal, whatever, as long as you're factually accurate and not libeling anyone and not using, profanity. We allow people to come in and speak in our forum. We don't have to do that. We're not mandated by anybody to run letters to the editor. We're not mandated to accept op-eds, but we do. And we think that's a service that our readers enjoy, that they're willing to, pay for as part of their subscriptions. But it's our choice. And when I'm evaluating letters to the editor or op-eds, which are longer pieces that people submit, I'm looking at what I think our market or what our readers will want to read about, what I find is interesting, what I find might contribute to the conversation, to the community conversation. So, in effect, I'm limiting what people say or what I allow people to say in our newspaper. I'm trying to give people leeway, but I have ultimate control over that. Not only limited as to what, we won't limit political positions, but we'll limit maybe content, certain content. Maybe we won't allow somebody to just spew racist opinions. My general feeling is that you want to allow all points of view, not just to be open about it, but also to allow other people to see what other people are thinking. And I think that's healthy. If you've got somebody I strongly disagree with writing in, then you're going to have somebody else strongly disagreeing with them, and then you're seeing different points of view. But I'm as the newspaper editor on this particular section, I'm the one kind of controlling what goes in and what goes out, even to the point of limiting how many words they can have that I allow them to have on our in our newspaper. Op-eds, people submit opinion pieces all the time. Sometimes I run them, sometimes I don't. It might be something that on a topic that I don't think the readers will find maybe very interesting, or that we've already covered before, or that I only have limited space for a certain amount of opinion pieces, so I got to pick and choose which ones had nothing to do with the quality or the opinion or anything like that, but I'm deciding which opinions to put in the paper. Now, if the government's going to come along and say, you have to publish all points of view, and anything that you get, you have to publish because that's fair, and you have an obligation to cover as much news as you can and all the facts. Then, in effect, I think they're censoring my ability to decide what I put in my product, my news product, or my opinion section. I think it's a dangerous step to take if the government comes in and feels like they can say you have to publish this, or you have to cover this issue, or you have to give this balance even. Because balance even is in the eye of the beholder. Anything, as a reporter, your subjective viewpoints are always going to come in. You fight them off to give an objective point of view. If you're covering a story, you're trying to not just provide. You're not trying to provide balance. You're trying to provide accurate coverage. If there's 500 people protesting on one side and 10 people protesting on the other, you don't want balance. You don't want to give the 10 people the same level of coverage as the 500 because, obviously it's not even.
Would that be balance and proportion, right?
Right, balance and proportion. So you won't give them equal play in a story. As a reporter, you look at it and say, what is really going on here? And you don't want to bend over backwards to say, okay, we have to give each side equal amounts of time or equal amounts of space.
So what's
you cover the story as you see it.
What's your take then on news stations or newspapers that placate specifically to one side? So, for example, the Daily Wire is very conservative. They know their audience. They placate their audience. They take their opinions in one direction. Conversely, you have Huffington Post.
Mm-hmm.
They go the exact opposite way. I guess my real concern isn't so much with whether or not we should force people to say things, because putting it in the perspective that you've presented, it definitely doesn't seem like something I would traditionally believe in. And that's why I enjoy having guests on, because it allows me to really expand the thought process. But how do you tell someone, or how do you advocate to someone what's considered a credible or reliable news source if everything is polarized? Or not everything, but if major sources are polarized, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, amongst others, and then newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the New York Post. How do you tell people what's a credible news source?
I think you have to separate the news from opinion, and a credible news source is one that covers the news objectively. The New York Times does that. They cover the news objectively. Now, maybe their opinion section, and we receive the New York Times syndicated service, and a lot of their columnists are liberal. So when I'm trying to evaluate what columns to share with our readers, I'm taking that into account. I don't want to maybe go too heavy liberal. I don't want to maybe go too heavy conservative. I'm trying to find more analytical pieces, whatever. But I think you evaluate them on the objectivity of their news coverage and the facts that they present. The TV stations, the cable news networks, I don't have a problem with them. You having a conservative cable station and a liberal station, but if you're getting your news from them, you want to evaluate it. Is the news being presented objectively? Then what their viewpoint is of it, or their interpretation of it, that's a whole different thing. In our paper, it says opinion on my section in letters about, and 2 inches tall, at the top of the page. In our newspaper, when you're getting opinion, the rest of it's news and advertising. So we don't blur the lines. So I think the problem with the cable stations is that they blur the lines. Sometimes the reporters are slanting the news while they're reporting it. Again, if you've got a commentator and you say, I'm a commentator and I'm speaking, this is my opinion, or this is the station's opinion, or the ownership's opinion on what just happened, I'm evaluating an objective news report, and here's how I'm evaluating it. That's opinion. I don't have a problem with that. I'm an opinion writer. I'm looking at, as my job, I also write editorials for the newspaper, obviously, and I'm looking at the straight news stories in my paper and in other news organizations, and I'm evaluating what I think of what they reported. I'm not vocalizing an opinion to create a position in the news reporting. I'm evaluating it after it's been reported, and I don't have a problem with that. The problem is you get into it is when they blur the lines, and I think that's what a lot of people see. You'll see, can you trust a Fox News report if their news is deliberately slanted or deliberately opinionated? Same thing with MSNBC or whatever. And the same thing when you're looking at the New York Times. Is their reporting slanted? Or is it, straight, solid, investigative reporting, and then when their opinion writers and their op-ed people take, the choices that they select for their to represent their opinions, then maybe you say that has a liberal slant. So, but again, with newspapers and broadcasts are different. In newspapers in the old days, when each town had more than one newspaper, you would have a conservative paper and a liberal paper.
Yeah.
And they would cover the news, and then they would have competing opinions in the opinion section, and maybe they wouldn't run. A liberal paper wouldn't run conservative letters to the editor. Like I was saying earlier, is like I like the back and forth. I think it's good to have all different voices to share. But back then, maybe they want to perpetuate a certain opinion. They're going to ignore, a conservative paper is going to ignore those liberal opinions, those liberal letter writers, and those liberal letter writers will know to write into the liberal paper to get their points of view apart. With the broadcast, you do run into a little bit of a difference, because we were talking earlier off the air about access and how the public has access to that. Cable is a different, can you access cable without a subscription?
Yeah.
But regardless, broadcasting is different than newspapers. It's different than magazines. With a magazine, I was talking when I edit letters to the editor, I'll edit them for, if somebody tries to, write something obscene or profanities or anything like that, I'll edit those out.
And that's like what the FCC requires of us for radio
for broadcasting. But for me, I could run them if I wanted to, but then, I'd have 200 readers cancel their papers when they saw the F word in a letter to the editor, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
If somebody goes too far on a racist comment, maybe they can express a point of view that one might consider to be, I don't want to say racist, but a point of view that may be different than somebody else's on the topic. I'll give them so much rope, but then probably cut them off if they go too far. I don't want to run anti-Semitic comments. I don't want to run false things like, the Holocaust didn't exist, that sort of thing. That in a way is my way of limiting speech.
Yeah, and that's completely fair, because
right.
there's no benefit to having that broadcasted,
But if your opinion is people should be able to say whatever they want to say and believe whatever they want to believe, then the standard would be, well, then you have to publish all that stuff.
Kind of putting in a little catch-22 or a little predicament right there.
Uh-huh.
With basically everything you just said, where it's kind of just like whether you believe everybody should have the right to say everything they want or whether they should be censored for that, kind of puts everybody in a little bit of predicament with it.
So then let's look at it from a social media standpoint on the internet.
Yeah.
Because we have people who are, and I've come out against it on the show, but I'm an adamant opponent to a website like 8chan, which allows anonymous posting, which almost always ends somewhere either anti-Semitic or blatantly racist, usually the detriment of Jews, Muslims,
well, I mean,
and
also
blacks.
online, you also run into Godwin's law, where the deeper you go into a conversation, especially online, the more likely it is that somebody will compare someone or something to Hitler, stuff like that.
Right, but to get to the point is that I've come out against it. I'm trying to say in my everyday life that people should be able to do what they want. They should be free. But then you go on websites like this, which was my prerogative. I looked it up, and you see all this detrimental, unintelligent, blatantly ignorant posting and dangerous posting that's riling people up. We've seen 2 atrocities committed after activity on this website.
Yeah,
and it's becoming a cesspool for violence and aggression with negative results in real life. And in my opinion, we should be able to shut that down. Like New Zealand and Australia shut those websites down. They censored the websites by saying you're not allowed to exist in our countries on our platforms. That's that's censorship, but I think it was appropriate.
Well, is that censorship in the word of quashing speech, or is it censorship in terms of protecting the public? Like it's against the law to incite violence. So if you're saying something on a website that's inciting people into violence, then that's against the law. They're not censoring you. That's crime, right? I mean, you might say that the police are, law enforcement. The law itself is a censorship law, and that it's telling you what, but promoting terrorism or recruiting terrorists, actively doing that, that's a crime. But that I think now you're running into kind of gray areas of where is it free speech and where is it criminal activity? And I think it comes down to action. I could be wrong on that, but I think it is. It's like what if you're maybe calling on somebody to do something. I don't see anything wrong with. I see something wrong with racist comments, but I don't see anything wrong with having a site where these people can go. The same thing with letting the KKK picket. I mean, I'll be out there screaming at them, but they have a right to picket. So on the internet, do they have the same right to express their points of view as repulsive and vulgar and disgusting as they are? I think the other question that you might want to get into is where's the internet fall on this between, private newspapers, magazines, publishing whatever they want, and that broadcasting? Is the internet now today's broadcast network? Everybody has access to it, or does it fall in the line of private, a business that the government should have no hand in regulating?
Well, that's a beautiful segue into what we were talking about, shadow banning.
Yeah.
Earlier with another host. There's an overwhelming consistency on behalf of companies like Facebook and Twitter to begin censoring their users.
Yeah.
Now, we don't pay for Facebook. We don't pay for Twitter if you have them, because they make money off advertising.
Yeah.
And this is where you have the platform versus publisher argument. Is Facebook a platform or is Facebook a publication? Under freedom of the press, the publication would be allowed to censor things at their discretion, just like a broadcast or a newspaper, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, a platform would be just a strict open to anybody, say whatever you want. You shouldn't be censoring a platform. Is that basically the assumption between publisher and platform? Do we agree on that differentiation?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so with that being said, should Facebook be censoring pages like the Liberty Den or when they went after Breitbart? Should they be limiting subscriptions to more controversial extremist, or not even all that extremist, just heavy right-wing or libertarian papers, or authoritarian even?
All right, sorry guys to cut you off. I would hear a quick sponsorship from our station, WVCR 88.3, The Saint.
All right, guys, that was a wonderful sponsorship. Justin, why don't you kick it off again and tell us what you think about our last topic?
Yeah, I mean, like, that's a excuse me, that's a tough question to tackle. I mean, like, they are a company, yes, but they also are publicly traded. So that kind of goes into a little bit of a gray area. Or if you go into the thing of like, oh, they're a business, so they have a right to censor their own like material and what comes on that platform. But if they're publicly traded, is it more of a public like living space or whatever, like communication space?
Well, again, are they committing crimes with some of their speeches, or are they encouraging people to commit dangerous acts? Like one of the things they want to discourage on Facebook or limit them is running the Facebook lives where people go out and either blow something up or kill themselves.
Yeah.
Obviously nobody wants, that to appear.
Yeah.
But with the Facebook Live forum, you can't edit it before it happens. Okay?
True.
So you're going to do some kind of delay or whatever on Facebook Live and then have somebody screen millions of videos or live videos. So, yeah, I think that's a tougher thing. I think the internet it falls into that original, the Communications Act of whatever year it was, 34. Is that still in effect?
Yeah.
That's what I learned in 1985 at I think college. But does the internet fall under that broadcasting thing that everybody has access to, that broadcasting category, or does it fall under the private business that can say and do whatever it wants, as long as they're not committing an act of crime? So, is the internet the platform, or is Facebook and Twitter the platform? Because the internet you can access. You drive by, someplace where there's a Wi-Fi, whatever, and you can pick up the internet, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to go on Facebook, you have to become a member. If you want to go on Twitter, you have to actively sign up, put your email address in there and your phone number.
Yeah, you have to agree
else,
all
right?
their terms and conditions.
Right. So you basically subscribe to them, and then you agree to whatever they say, which nobody reads, but it probably has a lot of limiting stuff as to what you can say and can't do, and when they can kick you off if they think you've gone too far, right?
They can suspend your account or
right.
whatever.
So they have so in that way they're more newspaperish, or magazine, print, private business. So then how can you justify government stepping in and telling them what they can and can't do, who can come on? Maybe they want to do, maybe they're like me, where it's like, I won't run somebody who's writing profanity or a Holocaust denier, because I think my readers will find that offensive. I find it offensive, but I also just don't think there's a place for it in my paper. But if they do, is that the government's role to jump in and say, no, you can't do that?
Would you see any difference if they were like Facebook or Twitter, which are publicly traded companies?
What's the difference between a publicly traded company and a company that's not traded on the stock market? It's still a private company, right?
Yeah. I would see that's where I would say it doesn't necessarily matter. I've always looked at Facebook kind of like someone's house. I don't know if this is the proper way to look at it, but this is how I've rationalized it, which is that Facebook makes money by selling your information.
Yeah.
To advertising companies who can
and you
then
see
market,
all over the internet on every other site you go on.
Well, that's a more in-depth issue on marketing and data sharing, but it's basically Facebook says you can sit here for free, but we're going to take your name and all the information you fill out in your About Me and your posts and market you as a piece of data to advertising agencies. That's their business.
But in some way, didn't you agree to that? I mean, again,
I
didn't read the fine print on it either.
Yeah, I'm not.
I just signed up.
I
want to be on Facebook so I can see my friends'
absolutely.
graduations. But somewhere in there, there's a big long scrolling thing that I didn't read that I just clicked I agree so I could post my pictures on Facebook, my vacation pictures.
I mean, I don't think I know anybody who actually has read the terms and agreements of it.
Right, but I'm sure they're on there. We don't know what they are.
I'd be impressed if they did.
Which is the important part in this conversation.
If they did, you probably wouldn't sign up for it.
Yeah, and this is why, because it does. Here's the thing. I'm not saying Facebook shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Facebook's made a lot of money doing that.
Billions of dollars.
And if that's their business model, there's no law against saying you can't, especially if you put in a terms and conditions policy that we all signed. I'm all for Facebook making money that way. If you want your privacy, don't have a Facebook. If you don't want to send your information out there, you don't need a Facebook to survive in today's world. That's a logical fallacy.
It's a luxury.
Also, if you don't want to read somebody's posts, I mean, every once in a while, I'll follow Trump, and then I'll see 20 tweets on a Sunday morning. I'm like, I don't want to listen to this stuff. It's just ruining my day, and I'll block them. And then later on, I'll go, so I don't have to see what other people are posting. You have the ability to kind of almost create your own newspaper there, in a way.
Which there's an information bubble that you create where Neil deGrasse Tyson explained this fantastically, ironically, on a show called Hot Wings. Or Hot Ones, where they eat hot wings.
Oh, but he said, that show.
He said the internet fell into our laps with no manual on how to use it, and people are creating information bubbles where they think they have some cosmic revelation about the world, and they find other people that believe things the same way they do, and they only surround themselves with one uniform
it's
opinion.
groupthink. I mean, it's the whole entire thing back to earlier in the conversation when we were talking about the marketplace media, where you just pick and choose what you want to hear, and you just take out what you don't want to hear.
Correct. So when we apply this to Facebook, right, I followed the Liberty Den. I had the pleasure of meeting the founder of Liberty Den. Obviously, Nicole, the former host, ran Liberty Den University here on campus. He was just recently subject to a set of Facebook limitations put on his page, which is upsetting because he spent a lot of time working on it, and I like his opinions. I like what he did. He wasn't posting anything inflammatory or conflating facts.
Do you
or
know what the
anything like that.
limitations involved?
I don't specifically know it, but the page has gone dark for a little bit. So
Did he
far,
violate their rules of conduct?
as far as
Republished?
following his personal page,
Mhm.
he hasn't posted that he violated rules of conduct, but I would assume they have found rules of conduct that he violated, because Facebook's always had a knack for being like, oh, you remember this part of the contract you didn't read?
Right.
And again, if you didn't read it, how would you know?
Right.
So it's, again, Facebook is acting more like a publication.
Yeah.
And the internet might be the platform, but like I said earlier, it's like looking at someone's house. It's as if Mark Zuckerberg invited you to live in his house rent free on the grounds that you abide by his rules, and every once in a while he can tell a magazine company that you can advertise to my housemate, but it's still his house.
Right. And can the government tell him what he can and can't do, even with something like, the Facebook Live suicides and the bombings and the whatever?
Yeah.
Can the government? You don't want that. If you're Facebook, then it's probably up to your audience to say, I don't want to see that stuff.
Pretty
So
much.
you better regulate it, or else I'll stop being on Facebook, and that way all your pop-up ads won't show up on my internet anymore, and all that stuff, and you will lose business. So that could be a market-driven way to censor Facebook, or to get them to conform, just like it is with us. I'm not running, if I've got 75-year-olds, readers who are offended by damn and hell, then I'm not going to run the letters or anything like that, stories that say that. When Trump said the F word in the Mueller report, some papers published it, some papers didn't, depending on what exactly he said, depending on whether they thought their audiences were, okay with it. I mean, in newspapers, we're running, stories about rape. I always say this is not, newspapers are PG-13. It's not a general audience thing. It's not a kids magazine. And the same thing, maybe you could say, and I'm just kind of being devil's advocate here, you might be able to say the same thing about Facebook. If you don't want to be on it, don't be on it. If you don't want your kids on it, get your kids off of it.
I think that's
more
actually a
it's
good
more
way of looking at it.
R-rated maybe than PG-13, but most of the time, I'm on there. I'm 55 years old, and I'm following. My high school friends' kids are graduating from college, and I go on vacation and I go to a SPAC concert and I post that kind of stuff. That's kind of junk that I'm putting on there.
Yeah, it's similar.
But a lot of people are using it for political means. Newspapers and TV stations use Facebook to kind of promote their stuff. I mean, we post our stories on Facebook. The TV stations, other newspapers do it to read the stories. So everybody's using it. I'm not sure where I was going with the point, but is it something that the government should be regulating, or should it be regulated by the subscribers as to what they're willing to pay for and what they're willing to accept?
So in a world where the internet is the new marketplace for information, and newspapers have become publications online like Wall Street Journal, HuffPo, BuzzFeed, which is
Well, you
we're
have
all
this
on.
whole entire new thing with blogs too.
right. So with this new way of thinking, if you have a site like Facebook that is saying we're a publication, we are choosing to, regardless of how they describe themselves, we've established, at least on this show, we can agree they act like a publication for the most part.
Yeah.
When you see that, is it time then for maybe people who don't want to conform to that way of doing things, creating their own website and having a rival to Facebook or an alternative place to go post things like that? Like that Patreon started out in a similar fashion, and they started limiting speech. YouTube's limited videos. Twitter's limited posts from certain people. But is it time that group goes and forms another website? Is that kind of like creating a new publication? And if so, how do you weed out? Well, I guess supply and demand would weed out people you don't want there, just like I'm suggesting we do with Facebook. But how do you also stay away from including the people that show up in the recesses of the internet trying to incite acts of violence? The biggest problem with 8chan and 4chan is no one can ever get caught because they're anonymous until something bad happens. 4chan much less so, but 8chan's really the new big bad guy on the internet. And it's how do you punish them aside from banning the whole website? Because you can't go after people with anonymous IP addresses that have been rerouted through Tor browsers and whatnot.
Yeah.
And how do you
Well, I mean, that's the whole entire point. It's just to hide themselves so they don't get in trouble for it.
right, but how do you then, if you're trying to leave Facebook saying it's too liberal or it's too restrictive, I want my own space. How do you create that space without accidentally picking up the crap that Facebook tried to eliminate from their space?
Well, wasn't there's something called MySpace before Facebook, and it wasn't that what it was
yeah.
called?
Yeah.
And it was kind of a similar thing. I remember having it.
Yeah, Facebook eclipsed them.
Right.
Pretty bad.
So what happened was
Very much
competition
so.
came along. They weren't doing whatever consumers wanted or whatever, and they came along and overrode them. I don't know if they're still in business or not, but they definitely
I think
put
they're
them
out
down.
or pretty close to being out.
But
Yeah.
but there you had competition take them out, and the other way the government might be able to get in and regulate these organizations is if they declare them monopolies. Is that something that we would encourage, or if Facebook dominates the social media market for this particular area, just like some Boeing might dominate airplane manufacturing. I know it doesn't, but is that a way for the government to find inroads into censoring and regulating a business like this, or breaking them up? I don't know how you break up Facebook.
Well, the monopoly argument, I don't think it'll stick because we discussed the way they make money is something that hundreds of thousands of companies do, which is
It's not
advertising
something
space.
that
Right.
they have a monopoly
Right,
over.
it can break up Walmart, or something like that. It'd be
Yeah.
kind of
Or
the same
Amazon
thing.
or something like
Amazon,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because Amazon's interesting because Amazon's actual business is facilitating other business transactions. Amazon, until it started creating its own minor product lines, but like Amazon basically says, you have something you want to sell, I have something I need to buy. Let's put it together. Their only real competition's eBay or maybe Etsy, but like Amazon's so weird because they made so much money just by
Being a middleman.
Yeah, being the middleman to a negotiation that was going to happen anyway. But I don't think that's not you can't put a monopoly on that. There's other businesses that do it, just not as well as they do.
But say you're a person who enjoys Facebook, wants to stay on it, and you want the government to come in and do something. Is that a legitimate? Yeah, I don't want to see the snuff videos. I don't want to, whatever you guys are allowing. I don't want to see
Yeah.
Russian bot ads for I don't want to see certain things. Is that something the public could demand and therefore maybe allow or encourage? And is that the right way to go? I'm kind of posing the question, doing your job a little bit. Taking over your seat.
Well,
but
to answer.
Yeah.
But no, that question's actually important because there was a Adam Conover. Adam Ruins Everything. I don't know if you've seen it. Did one on Facebook's data gathering and basically said we would have been better off paying for it because your information wouldn't have been out there. But the internet is free. You don't pay. You pay to use the internet through your cable company, but
Right.
you don't pay to use Facebook. You don't pay to use Twitter. You don't pay to use Instagram or Snapchat because they're using your data. That was the terms and agreement that you signed.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of hurts competition because you don't need to compete for subscriptions. You don't need to compete for user. I can have and do an Instagram, a Snapchat, a Facebook. I don't want a Twitter, but if I wanted one, I can have one. At one point in time, a long time ago, I had a Tumblr. At one point, I had a Kick. At one point, Yahoo Mail, Outlook, Gmail. You can have all of these ways of gathering information for free. You don't have to pay for any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of where I think we went wrong because if you did have to pay for it, if you had to pay for it, you would have had to choose between, do I want a Snapchat? Do I want an Instagram? Do I want a Facebook? Or do I want a Twitter? And they would have had to have been more innovative with how they present themselves in order to get your attention away from the others.
And you really can't unring that bell anymore. You can't go back and say, okay, well, we should be charging for access to it or whatever. It's like with the newspaper industry, one of the big mistakes they made was giving away their content early on. When the internet came out, we said, well, let everybody see it. And that way it'll expose more of them to our product and then they'll read more, they'll buy more papers. But what happened is that people just started anticipating getting their news for free. And then when newspapers started putting up paywalls to say, hey, you should be paying for this. Reporting costs money. Putting out a website costs money, having editors and all this other stuff.
You get a certain amount of free articles.
Yeah. But it's a challenge now because people have gotten used to just getting their news for free. And I think maybe that's probably been the same case with the internet now. If you start trying to go and say, all right, Facebook, you can't do this, you can't do that, or Twitter, you have to do this. You're not allowed to have certain people on here. We're going to tell you what you can and can't put on your site. Maybe that time has passed. Maybe the government can't get a hold of that anymore. Maybe the public won't even accept that anymore. So, I don't know what the solution is, but maybe maybe it's gone too far.
So earlier in the episode, I briefly mentioned Ben Shapiro's incident at UC Berkeley a few years back, where he was prevented from speaking despite a college group wanting to host him, and which was weird because he had spoken the year prior. My question is, because it was UC Berkeley, which is a state school, if I'm correct, right? University of California. Is that a form of government censorship? Is that a government entity telling someone they can't speak or not? Because they cited safety reasons, but the safety reasons came from protesters, not from his group. The group that wanted to host him were calm. The people that came to protest were the ones that were threatening violence or getting rowdy. And last year we had a similar issue we talked extensively about on the show.
Yeah, we've had that. We also have...
But we're a private institution, so that's a big difference with censorship. If Siena College, is a private entity, said, no, dude, you're causing too much of a ruckus, get off.
Yeah, we've had protests for people who don't like what other people said for a few years. I mean, in 2016, we made Forbes' list of most ridiculous college protests when there was a billboard down the road of Siena that was advertising a kitchen, and it said, "Your wife wants me." And there was a huge protest about that from campus. And
so stupid.
Yeah, that was...
It's a horrible advertisement.
It was an advertisement that was down the street, and it's like, really funny. I don't remember the name of the company off the top of my head, but then they basically came back and said, like, thank you guys for giving us more like attention to our product and our business. Yeah. And then like we ended up making it to Forbes. Mama, Siena made it to Forbes.
Yeah, right.
Well, does government have the UC Berkeley thing's pretty interesting because does government have an obligation to allow all forms of free speech and therefore a requirement that they're not allowed to reject it? And does a college campus qualify as a government entity censoring people? And is not having a speaker censoring that speaker or saying, no, you can't come because there's just going to be too much craziness. We don't have security. We don't have the money to protect everybody. It's a public safety issue. We don't want you on there. Do they have an obligation to have that speaker come on there, no matter how vile or whatever disgusting things they say, or even if it's not vile and disgusting, even if it's just a conservative point of view and everybody else is liberal? And again, I'm just asking: is that government censorship by saying no, we don't want that kind of speaker on our campus?
I think that the distinction is whether it's a state or private school. If you're getting federal funding, which is kind of bringing up Trump's censorship thing, where he said there was a recent one about social media, but there was one a few months ago where he actually said if you
the executive order,
if you censor speakers, you won't get federal funding.
Yeah, but private companies get federal and state funding. Construction companies, to build a project or something like that. So does that make them a public
contracted
entity?
out?
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, we get a tax break or a government grant for putting up a factory and employing 500 people. Does that make them on the same level as government and therefore subject to that they can't?
I think
regulate
the government entity is because the state runs the school.
Mm-hmm.
And if the state runs the school, because this happened in my home state at UConn, same guy. I wanted to go. I got a group of people from the community college. Said, let's get in the car, let's go down to UConn, we'll see it. We'll be back by dinner. And UConn put out a message saying, if you're not already part of the club that's sponsoring it, you are not coming. It doesn't matter if you go to a state school. It doesn't matter if you are a citizen. It's just for these groups of kids. We don't want any outside participation. And that to me was bordering where I would have been like, that you're censoring him at that point. But you have an obligation to say that's a campus and there's a security reason you don't let anybody on your campus.
Yeah, I mean, that came down.
Yeah, what if you're a parent and you're paying tuition, $20,000 a year to have your daughter go there, and you're worried about them getting shot in a violent.
So that's
protest.
where it was slightly different. But at UC Berkeley, the issue seemed to be that protesters were students that go to UC Berkeley and people they brought in, whereas the group that was endorsing him at the time was just hanging out waiting for him to come speak. And that is where, and then security escorted him off the property, which is where I think that should constitute a form of censorship, because a division of the school, the student body, said, we want this guy to come here. Everything was green lit. He had been there before. And then another separate section of the student body got so irate about it, they started causing security issues. And instead
this
of
happens.
punishing the kids
This
for causing
isn't just
security
an
issues,
issue with.
you punished him.
This isn't just an issue with Ben Shapiro. I mean, this has happened with other people, like it happened with Jordan Peterson, happened with Milo Yiannopoulos, happened with a whole plethora of speakers. And if there's a group of individuals that can become violent, that disagree with this person, they will do anything to shut him down nowadays, or them down.
Yeah. So
do the colleges have an obligation to pay for an unlimited amount of security, hiring the sheriff's department or the National Guard or whoever to come in and control this just so that speaker has an opportunity to speak?
I think that the college has an obligation to provide security for the campus, but I also think that the college has an obligation to tell students that just like they paid to go to a state school, other students from the state or out of state paid to go to a state school, and a state school means you have a freedom of speech compulsion, and your right to petition is infringing on this man's right to speak at the invitation of the college and the students who go to the college, because the college greenlit it originally. It's not like they said he's never coming here. He was there the year before. He was allowed to come back, and they said, oh, once you're here, gotta go. So I feel like, yes, going to extreme measures to enhance security, and of course speakers always come with their own budget and saying, you got to pay for my security. That's
you got to negotiate the contract.
The contract negotiations would come into play, and you don't have an obligation to pay someone what they think they're worth, but you do have an obligation to be fair to every student that comes in there. And if a student has an approved green-lit speaker coming in, you should give that priority over students petitioning.
Yeah, I think there's a practicality that you have to, examine here. I think college campuses should be, a place where people should feel comfortable being able to go and share different points of view, conservative, liberal, whatever they are. In the 60s, that's kind of, that was where freedom of speech, was fostered. And now it seems that colleges are being a lot more cautious about who they bring in. If their liberal faculty doesn't want somebody, they'll be able to shut down a speaker. And you want to be able to foster dialogue, just kind of like I was saying just way earlier about my letters to the editor. I want to foster dialogue here, but I also have the ability to control it. Should colleges have the ability to control it, and what is their obligation to their students, the parents, the benefactors, the people who pay the money there, or is their obligation compared to their obligation to be a breeding ground for fair speech, or free speech? I think they're in a tough spot. Obviously, you'd want to lean toward just let everybody say what they want to say, and you should hear. I agree. You should hear what the other side sees, so you educate yourself not only about what they're saying, but also maybe to help you formulate an opposition opinion. It's all healthy, but in a practical state, they also have an obligation to protect the students, and they have a financial obligation. So I think it's a tough choice they're put under. You said the college didn't want to censor this person.
Yeah,
they got him out of there for a different reason. So it's a tough call I think they have to make.
Well, I think that's all the time we're going to have for this episode. It's been fun. I'm really enjoying these interviews. This was an amazing way to kick off the Summer of Rights, covering amendments in different ways, allowing people to get information I don't think that they either sought out themselves or have had access to.
Yeah.
Our listeners, I hope you're happy. Genuinely, I love doing this as much as you love hearing it. If you have any comments, you want to partake in the discussion, don't forget to email us at callingoutcontroversy.com. Hit up the WVCR website. Hit up YouTube comment section. You know, we're always there. Instagram, Calling Out Controversy on Instagram. Any other places to find us?
Now, do we have Facebook?
We don't have a Facebook. I'm not putting us on Facebook, but that's okay.
Even after we had this long conversation about Facebook, I think we owe it to them.
We'll see. Maybe a possible Facebook page in the future. Mark Mahoney, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, and also thanks for hosting this forum. I think it's a great opportunity to, for you guys to bring out important issues and to share them with the public. It's terrific. Thanks.
Thank you. Before we go, top 3 newspapers in your opinion?
The top 3 newspapers?
Top 3.
Let's see. Gazette.com. No. I think the Washington Post and the New York Times are the top 2, just based on their investigative reporting and their just the general quality of their products. I don't know what a third one would be. I would encourage people to support their local newspapers. You get you get your local news. It's the only place you're going to get it. Is finding out what's going on in your community. Is support your local papers.
Perfect. That's a great way to send us off. Thank you for listening, everybody. This has been WVCR 88.3 FM, The Saint.